In the golden city of Irewol, where glass towers kissed the clouds and traffic hummed like a restless river, there lived a man whose name stirred both admiration and envy. His name was Kwame Adesanya, a tycoon born of nothing, now clothed in everything. His face graced the covers of business magazines. His name rang through the halls of banks. When he walked into a room, silence bowed, and beside him stood a woman. Her name was Adana, soft-spoken, regal, the kind of beauty that felt like a lullaby after a storm. She was his wife, his crown jewel. Together they lived in a marble-white mansion on Obara Hill, where the breeze smelled of frangipani and money. The compound spread like a private kingdom, koi ponds, silk curtains, glass staircases and guards at every gate. To outsiders, they were perfect, the couple others wanted to be. But if you stepped past the iron gates, past the security, past the laughter at charity balls, you'd find something dark curling beneath the floors, something rotting, because behind Adana's soft eyes was a quiet ache, and behind Kwame's charming grin was a secret named Leona. Leona was fire in silk, young, brilliant, hungry. She worked as Kwame's personal assistant, and what began as stolen glances soon turned to whispered lies. They met in expensive hotels, touched like they were chasing forbidden fire, made promises with trembling mouths and guilty hands. Kwame, drunk on her danger, told himself this was what love should feel like. Wild, reckless, powerful, and in that wildfire, he forgot Adana. But Adana, she felt it. She smelled perfume she didn't wear, heard the silence that used to be laughter, felt the cold in his kiss. She didn't confront him immediately. No, she waited, watching, noticing, gathering evidence like raindrops in a jar. Until one morning, as the sun filtered through their satin drapes, she picked up his phone. And there it was, a message. "Last night was unforgettable. I can still taste you." Her hand didn't shake. She didn't scream. She walked into the kitchen where he stood sipping coffee and said, "I want a divorce." Kwame froze, not because his heart shattered, but because he saw his empire cracking. You see, in Irewola, the law was fair, and the law said Adana could take half of it all, half the houses, half the bank accounts, half the glory, and Kwame couldn't stomach that. He had built his empire with blood, sweat and bribes. He had clawed from the gutters to the glass ceiling. No woman, not even Adana, was going to strip him of what he earned. So he lied. "I ended it with Leona," he said. He wept at her feet, held her hand at dinner, took her dancing again, whispered promises like a man reborn. "I made a mistake," he said. "Let me fix it." For 2 weeks, he played the part of a reformed man, every touch rehearsed, every smile painted, and when Adana finally let her shoulders fall, when hope flickered again in her eyes, he made the final move. "Let's start over," he said. "A second honeymoon, just you and me. No noise, no shadows." Adana hesitated. Her heart had learned fear, but he was trying, and love, foolish love, wants to believe. So she agreed. They flew to the coastal village of Orunma, a paradise along the Bantu Ocean, where the sky stretched like a blue prayer and the waves danced like spirits in worship. The resort was built like a dream, thatched villas with glass, doors, flowers that bloomed at midnight, and soft music that followed you wherever you went. Adana breathed again. They had candle-lit dinners by the sea, slow walks beneath the stars. Laughter returned like an old friend. And Kwame, he played his part beautifully. He held her hand longer than needed, gave her looks that made her blush, spoke of the future like it was made of gold and redemption. But beneath it all, he was waiting. Because this was not a second chance. This was his final act. On their last evening, they dressed in matching white, symbolic, ironic. They dined under a palm tree lit with lanterns. Music played softly. Adana smiled, her heart floating like a paper boat. Then Kwame whispered, "Let's walk." One last stroll before we return home." She nodded. Why wouldn't she? The path was quiet. The forest beyond the resort was lush and private. The moon hung low, golden, like it was watching. They walked side by side. Her fingers brushed his. The air was sweet with night jasmine. Then he stopped. She turned, confused. "What's wrong?" He didn't speak. His eyes looked at her like she was already gone. Then a dull, cracking thud. Pain bloomed in her skull like fire. She gasped, but the sound was swallowed by the dark. Her knees buckled. The world spun. Then silence. Kwame crouched beside, her motionless body. His hands were steady, his breath loud. She was still breathing. "Good," he muttered. This had to be clean. No blood, no noise, no struggle, just like he planned. 2 nights earlier, he had snuck into the forest, dug a shallow grave, buried a wooden coffin, chose a place far from any path. Now he dragged her body there, her limbs limp, her mouth open but voiceless. The forest didn't protest. The moon didn't blink. When he reached the hole, he paused. She looked peaceful. Too peaceful. He lifted her gently as if she were a fragile heirloom and placed her in the coffin. The shovel struck the earth with a dull thud. Kwame's hands moved quickly, his breath heavy in the stillness of the forest. The moon above cast a ghostly silver over the trees, but down here, where he stood, it was shadows and sweat. He had just closed the coffin lid. Adana was inside, her body unmoving, her chest barely rising. Unconscious, not dead, but close enough for him. He hesitated for the first time that night, just a second, one single heartbeat. His eyes locked onto the coffin lid. Could he do this? Yes. He had to. He picked up the shovel again, pulled from the bushes where he'd hidden it 2 nights before, and began to pile soil over the box. Scoop after scoop, the earth swallowed her, and with every handful of dirt, he whispered inside his own head, she would have destroyed everything. She would have taken his businesses, his name, his future. She would have left him a hollow man. But this was control. This was necessary. He paused only to sprinkle coarse white salt between layers of soil. Not for purification, not for ritual. Salt to prevent animals from digging, to stop the smell. He had researched it like a man preparing a business deal. By the time the grave was level with the forest floor, his shirt clung to his back, his fingers were raw, his mind was still. Kwame stood back, wiped his hands on his trousers, and examined the site. Perfect. No disturbed leaves. No odd mounds, no signs, just earth, just silence. No one would ever find her here, and even if they did, by the time they thought to dig, nature would have erased it all. He turned and walked away. He didn't say her name, didn't pray, didn't cry. As far as he was concerned, Adana was now just part of the earth. By sunrise, Kwame stood at the resort's reception, breathing fast, eyes red, face folded into panic. "My wife," he gasped. She went for a walk last night. She hasn't come back." The receptionist straightened. "Since last night. I fell asleep waiting for her. When I woke up this morning, nothing. She's not in the room, not on the beach. Please." His voice cracked. The fear in it? Convincing. Within an hour, resort staff and local authorities were combing the shoreline, the gardens, the forest paths. Kwame joined them, or rather, pretended to. He called her name, shouted into the trees, let his shirt cling to his chest like he was truly sweating for her return. The police took a statement, asked questions, wrote it all down. A missing persons report was filed. And just like that, Adana was officially gone. 7 days later, Kwame boarded a flight back to Ayerwole, alone. He wore sunglasses at the airport. held a handkerchief to his eyes like a grieving husband. Told the press nothing. Privately, he smiled. It was over. The woman who once threatened his empire was buried in a forest with no name. He could finally live free, or so he believed. But what Kwame didn't know was this: he was not alone that night in the forest. Someone had seen everything. His name was Tinashe, a quiet man, a fisherman, a loner. He lived in a crooked hut by the Maji River, where the fish sang louder than the people. That night, Tinashe had gone into the woods with a lantern and a basket, checking the crab traps he laid near the wet marshes. That's when he heard it, the crunch of something heavy being dragged over dry leaves. He crouched behind a thorn bush, the light from his lantern extinguished with a single puff. His heart thundered in his ears. A man, tall, dressed too clean for this kind of place. And he was pulling something, and no, someone, a woman, limp. Tinashe's throat tightened. He watched in horror as the man placed the woman into what looked like a wooden box and began to bury her. His instincts screamed at him to run, but his legs would not move. He had no weapon, no phone, just fear. So he stayed hidden, chest to the ground, eyes wide, breathing through his teeth. And then the man was gone. Silence returned to the forest. Minutes passed, 10, maybe 15. Then Tinashe heard something else. At first it was soft, like scratching, then faster, desperate, erratic. Then a scream, muffled, like a soul crying through soil. Tinashe jumped up. "No!" he gasped. "No, no, no!" He sprinted toward the grave, dropped to his knees, dug with his bare hands. Dirt filled his nails, his fingers blistered, then thud. Wood. He scratched again, found the edges, tore at the lid. Inside, the woman was barely breathing. Her face was ghost white, her lips blue. Her fingernails were broken and bleeding. She had clawed until her skin split. Her chest rose once, slowly, shallow. Tinashe cradled her like she was made of clouds. "Stay with me," he whispered. "Stay, please." Her eyes fluttered, but there was nothing in them, no focus, no memory. She was alive, but she didn't know it. He wrapped her in his scarf, lifted her in his arms, and began to walk. For hours he walked, across the valley, through the forest, across the border into Kumusha, where the missionary hospital stood like a candle in the wilderness. He burst through the hospital doors, his legs trembling, shouting for help. Doctors rushed, and the nurses pulled her from his arms. They laid her on a table and began to work. Tubes, IVs, monitors, oxygen. Tinashe watched, silent. He didn't know her name, but something told him this woman's story was not over. Days passed. She did not wake. Her body remained still, her mind elsewhere. The doctor said it was a coma, caused by trauma, lack of oxygen, shock. She had no ID, no phone, no name. Tinashe visited every day. He brought her fresh flowers, told her stories about the river, about the moon, about how he once caught a fish bigger than his boat, and how no one believed him. He held her hand and told her that maybe, just maybe, she could wake up and tell him who she was. And then, one evening, after 6 months of stillness, her eyes opened. The hospital room was quiet except for the steady beep of the heart monitor and the soft hum of a ceiling fan. Outside, the wind whispered through tall mango trees, carrying the scent of dry earth and flowers into the open window. Inside, she stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, slowly, uncertain. The light stung. The world was a blur of pale colors and strange machines. She blinked again. Beside her bed sat a man, tired eyes, calloused hands, a weathered face full of quiet prayers. Tinashe. She stared at him. He leaned forward, breath held. "You're awake." Her lips parted. Her voice came out like wind against sand. Who am I?" A chill ran through Tinashe's spine. For a moment he said nothing, just watched her, his heart aching. "You don't remember?" She shook her head gently, her brows knit together. Her gaze moved across the room, the walls, the wires, the IV bag beside her. She didn't know where she was. She didn't know who she was. Not even her own name lived inside her. And so, the nurses gave her a name, Amale. It meant the beautiful one. Until she could remember her truth, they called her that, and she accepted it like a borrowed coat in a cold storm. Tinashe visited daily. He told her stories about the sea, of the giant fish he once caught and lost again, of the crocodile that chased him down the riverbank, of the spirits that whispered from under the moonlight. He brought her ripe mangoes and grilled tilapia, wrapped in leaves. He tried to make her laugh, and sometimes she did. Slowly, piece by piece, she began to help out around the small village hospital. She swept the corridors, organized supplies, sat beside the sick and prayed with them. Her hands found purpose again, not because she remembered who she had been, but because she was learning who she could become. She didn't know she had been buried alive. She didn't know the name Kwame. She didn't know she had once worn gold and walked through marble halls, but her spirit remembered pain. Her dreams were full of soil and gasping breath and a weight pressing against her chest. In her sleep she often woke clawing at her blanket as if she were digging through dirt again. But by day she smiled. She smiled because she had survived, even if she didn't yet know what she had survived. Far away, back in the towering city of Irawol, the man who had left her to die was flourishing. Kwame had returned home with tears in his eyes and lies on his lips. He played the grieving husband so well, not a soul suspected him. Not even Leona, the young secretary-turned-lover he married 2 months later. He expanded his empire, opened 2 more businesses, invested in real estate, hosted galas for charity. His face appeared on billboards beside luxury watches and private jets. He never looked back, never mentioned Adana's name again, and deep down he never regretted what he had done. To him, it was the price of freedom. But time is not always silent. Sometimes it circles back like a hawk, waiting to strike when you least expect it. And for Kwame, that time came 5 years later. It was the 20th of June. The sun had long set. The air was thick and still. Kwame sat in his leather chair, swirling a glass of brandy in one hand, while glancing through business reports. His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered with his usual tone. Yes? What came through was a voice he hadn't heard in 5 years. You think you got away with it. Then click. Silence. The line went dead. Kwame stared at the screen. His hand trembled slightly. A prank? Maybe a wrong number. He tossed the phone on the table and stood up, brushing off the unease. But the next night the phone rang again. Same number. He picked up slower this time. Who is this? Silence. Then a whisper. I'm coming for you. And the call ended. A coldness crept through his chest. He clenched his jaw and told himself it was someone's sick idea of a joke. But something old and rotting began to stir in his belly, something he hadn't felt in years. Fear, real, bone-deep fear. By the third night the voice changed. It was calmer, steadier. I remember everything. Kwame dropped the phone. It clattered against the floor. He stood there for a long moment, heart hammering against his ribs. Was it her? No, it couldn't be. He had buried her himself. He had touched her neck. She was barely breathing, but enough to go quietly. No, this wasn't real, but the calls didn't stop. Every night. You should have made sure I was dead. Whispers in the dark, soft, unforgiving. And after the phone went dead, the words stayed behind, crawling along, the walls settling in the shadows. He stopped sleeping. Every creak of wood in the mansion made him jolt. Every gust of wind rattling the windows felt like a whisper from the grave. He told Leona he was fine, but she noticed the nervous tapping of his fingers, the way he stared, too long at empty spaces. the way he jumped when the kettle whistled. She asked once, "What's wrong with you?" He said nothing. Because how do you tell someone you're being haunted by a woman you killed? How do you explain that your past is calling, and it remembers everything weeks past? He stopped answering the phone entirely, left it on silent, but still, he felt her presence, in mirrors, in dreams, in the stillness between each breath. One night, a full month after the first call, Kwame sat in his massive living room alone. The TV was off, the lights dim. Only the ticking of the old grandfather clock echoed in the silence. A bottle of whiskey sat half empty beside him. His hands were restless, his legs stiff. He didn't know what he was waiting for, but something inside him, something primal, knew it was coming. Then it happened. A knock, sharp, sudden. The sound thundered through the empty mansion. Kwame flinched, the glass in his hand nearly slipping. He froze, stared at the front door. Who would come here? This late? He didn't move, held his breath. Then another knock. Louder, heavier, his throat tightened. Maybe security, maybe a neighbor. He forced himself up, legs trembling beneath him. Bang, bang, bang. The door shook under the force, urgent, violent, like whoever stood outside already knew he was inside and wasn't leaving. A cold sweat broke down his back. Leona was out of town. No one was supposed to visit. No one. He moved slowly, step by step, across the marble floor. Each footstep echoed louder than the last. The knocking stopped. Silence again. And that was worse. He reached the door, paused. His hand hovered over the lock. His heart pounded in his chest like a trapped animal. He swallowed hard. Then he yanked the door open. The silence shattered his soul. He opened the door, expecting a guard, a neighbor, maybe even nothing. But instead, time froze. Standing there, on his porch in the night wind beneath the blinking porch light, was Adana. Alive, her skin pale beneath the moonlight, her eyes cold, locked onto him like a hawk sizing up a dying rabbit, and her lips curled into a slow, wicked smile. For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. Kwame's legs almost gave out. His breath caught in his throat, his mouth opened, but no words came. He stared like a man who'd just seen a ghost, because that's what she was, wasn't she? Dead, buried, gone. Yet here she stood, solid, breathing, watching him, his stomach twisted violently. His hands trembled. "No, no, it's not real. You can't be real," he stammered, stepping back instinctively. Adana tilted her head, the smile still playing on her lips, but it wasn't the smile he used to know. It wasn't gentle or soft. It was cold, calculated, quietly dangerous. "You didn't expect to see me again, did you?" Her voice was calm, controlled, like ice cracking across a still lake. Kwame's mind screamed at him to run, but his body was rooted, his knees locked in fear. Every cell in his body knew. This wasn't a reunion. This was reckoning. I don't understand," he muttered, chest heaving. "Oh, I think you do," she said, stepping one foot forward. The porch groaned under her weight. "You won, Kwame. You thought I was gone." He flinched. The glass in his hand slipped and shattered at his feet. This isn't possible," he choked. Adana's gaze didn't blink. Her voice dropped lower. "I remember." Those two words stabbed through the air, and suddenly her mind took her back. For 5 years Adana had lived like a ghost. She'd swept hospital floors with no memory of who she was, folding sheets for strangers, eating alone in a quiet corner. The staff called her Amale, and she answered because she had no other name to claim. Her nights were haunted. She woke up gasping, nails clawing at her mattress, drenched in sweat. Sometimes she screamed, sometimes she cried, but she never knew why. Shadows haunted her sleep, dirt in her throat, screams with no sound. But the day hours, they were numb, She cooked, she cleaned, she helped, she smiled, until one ordinary night she was wiping down the corner of a patient's room when the television caught her ear. A South African documentary murmured in the background, grainy footage, sad. Music, deep voices discussing unsolved cases. She almost tuned it out, until two words dropped like thunder into her bones. Buried alive. Her body froze. The mop handle slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a loud clack. Nurses turned. Someone called her name, but she didn't hear them. Her chest tightened, her breath shortened, her knees buckled, and she collapsed to the ground, eyes wide, gasping like she was underwater. And then it began. The memories flooded in, not gently, but like a wave crashing through a broken dam. They came roaring, a violent flood in her head, like thunder cracking through a quiet night. They shattered the shell she had been living in. One moment, she was standing in the hospital hallway, cleaning a patient's tray. The next, she was on the ground, clutching her chest, gasping like the air had turned to fire. Her body trembled, her skin turned cold, but it was her mind. Her mind was burning. She saw the result, the forest, the path, the hand that once held hers, Kwam's, now raising a rock, smiling as though nothing was wrong. That smile, it wasn't love. It was a lie wrapped in silk. And then the pain, that sickening thud, the cracking of her skull, the world dimming, her scream stuck inside her mouth. Then darkness. She remembered the weight of the coffin lid pressing down, the air thinning, her fingers clawing desperately at the wood until her nails split and bled. She had screamed until her voice gave out, until her chest tightened and her thoughts blurred. On the hospital floor, her body convulsed violently. Nurses ran to her, but she was trapped in a prison from 5 years ago, suffocating all over again. Her breath came in sharp sobs, her arms curled around her middle, her fingernails dug into her own skin, scratching, gripping, breaking. She wasn't in a hospital anymore. She was buried. Again. "Adana!" one of the nurses cried out. "What's happening?" But the woman couldn't hear her. All she could hear was the sound of dirt falling on wood. She remembered it all. Kwame had tried to kill her. He had buried her alive. That was the truth. And now she had remembered. Her eyes flared open as her voice cracked through clenched teeth. "He buried me!" The nurse backed up, startled. Adana stood suddenly, like the force of that memory had thrown her upright. She was shaking from head to toe, but her eyes were blazing with something new, something sharp, awake, alive. The nurse reached for her. "Amale, sit down, please." But Adana turned her head slowly and whispered, "My name is Adana." She was no longer the nameless woman sweeping floors. She was no longer a ghost. She was the woman who had survived her own death and remembered every second of it. And with that name came something even stronger than anger. Purpose. She didn't sleep that night. She sat in the corner of her small hospital room, her knees drawn to her chest, her arms folded tightly. Her eyes didn't blink. Her mind didn't rest. For years she had moved quietly through life, lost in a mist she couldn't explain. But now the fog was gone. Now she could see the truth, and it was soaked in betrayal. She didn't want revenge. She wanted justice. Kwame had tried to erase her, but she had clawed her way back. And now it was time for him to face what he had buried. Days later, she stood in the doorway of the same mansion where he had once kissed her and promised forever. But now she wasn't here for memories. She was here to finish a story that never should have begun. Kwame stared at her like a man seeing death itself. His mouth opened. No words came. He looked like he might faint. Adana's voice was low and steady. "I remember the forest." Kwame's throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. "I remember the rock in your hand, the walk under the moonlight, the moment your smile faded and your eyes turned cold." She took a step forward. I remember the weight of death pressing down as you shoveled dirt over my body. I remember my own screams, the scratch marks I left inside that coffin. She held up her palms. Faint scars ran along the base of her fingers. You see these? These are from trying to survive the grave you gave me. Kwame stepped back. I didn't. I only hit you because you said you wanted half of everything. Adana's voice rose, sharp as a blade. I never wanted anything from you except love, Kwame. But you wanted me dead. And now I remember the man who pulled me out, the man who saved me. And I remember you. She leaned in close, her breath cold on his face. You tried to strangle me too, didn't you? His face turned ghostly white. No, I didn't. I panicked. I thought you were gone. Adana nodded slowly. So, you meant to finish the job. I didn't want you coming back, Kwame snapped. You were a thorn in my flesh. His voice cracked as the mask finally dropped. Yes, I wanted you dead. You were in the way, and even now you're still a curse on me. He lunged, faster than thought. His hands reached for her throat. She stumbled back, her arms blocking as he snarled and slammed her against the wall. But before he could grip tighter, bang! The door burst open. Freeze! Uniformed officers stormed in, their guns drawn, boots thundering against the polished floor. Kwame froze, his fingers still around Adana's throat, his eyes wide like a beast caught in a trap. Let her go! One of the officers barked. Kwame's hands slipped off her as he stumbled back. Adana adjusted her shirt, her expression steady, almost calm. I already called the police, she said softly, not taking her eyes off him. They've been listening outside this whole time. Kwame's lips parted, but no words came. The weight of truth had crushed every lie in his throat. His hands were yanked behind his back, the cold metal of handcuffs locking tightly around his wrists. His knees buckled as two officers held him upright. You are under arrest, one officer declared, for attempted murder and for burying your wife alive. No, this isn't happening, Kwame yelled. She was dead. I made sure she was supposed to stay buried. He twisted violently, trying to break free, but there was no escape now. Not from this. Not from her. Adana stepped forward slowly, her eyes locked on the man who had once vowed to protect her. Ooh, and left her to die. She leaned in, so close her breath touched his ear. You should have made sure I was dead, she whispered. Kwame recoiled as if her voice was fire. I should have finished you when I had the chance, he spat, foaming with rage. But the officers dragged him away, his curses trailing behind like flies to rot. Adana stood in the doorway, still, steady. She didn't move. She didn't smile. She only watched as the man who thought himself untouchable was shoved into the back of a police van like discarded garbage. For 5 years, he had slept like a king, believing he had silenced her forever. For 5 years, he had smiled at the world, thinking the past had been buried for good. But justice does not sleep, and Adana had returned, not as his wife, but as the truth. The trial became national news. Every headline screamed his name. Every news anchor retold the horrifying tale. A powerful businessman who had tried to erase his wife to protect his empire. In court, Adana sat tall in the front row, not to seek revenge, but to be seen, to be heard, to take her rightful place in a world that tried to forget her. Witnesses were called. The fisherman who saved her spoke with tears in his eyes. The doctors who brought her back testified with trembling voices, and when Adana took the stand, the room held its breath. I was buried alive, she said, steady and strong, and I remember everything. Her words echoed through the courtroom like thunder on dry ground. It took the jury only 3 hours. Guilty. The judge's voice rang out with finality. Kwame Adesanya, you are hereby sentenced to life imprisonment with no possibility of parole. The gavel struck. And so did justice. Kwame's fall was as loud as his rise. His empire collapsed overnight. Investors pulled out. Clients vanished. Banks froze his accounts. The man who once wore silk now sat behind bars in an orange jumpsuit, his face hollow. Haunted, alone, no boardrooms, no cameras, no power, just a cold cell and the memory of the woman who rose from the grave. Leona, the woman he once chose over Adana, disappeared from the public eye. No one knew where she went. No one cared. And Adana, she walked out of the courtroom a free woman, not because the law had saved her, but because she had saved herself. She didn't chase vengeance. She didn't demand compensation. She asked for nothing. Her survival was enough. She had faced the dirt, the dark, and the death meant for her, and she walked out stronger. In her silence, there was thunder. In her scars, there was a story no cage could contain. Because some secrets cannot stay buried, because sometimes the dead do not stay dead, because truth may be slow, but it always arrives. Evil may cover its tracks with charm, with wealth, and with power. But truth has roots, and no matter how deep you bury it, the truth will always claw its way to the surface. So be careful how you treat others, especially the ones who once loved you, because you never know which soul will rise again with fire in her eyes and justice in her hands. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If this tale moved you, shocked you, or gave you chills, then don't keep it to yourself. Like the video, share it with someone who loves powerful stories, and subscribe to the channel for more unforgettable African tales. Until next time, stay blessed and remember the past always knocks. Be ready to answer.